Hello, welcome to the QnA Tech School. I am your host, Jonathan Kyle Hobson, and today we're going to talk about the end of the world, technology at the end of the world. The QnA Tech Show is presented by Qonda Entertainment, and today's discussion is the end of the world. So please watch us. If you already are, then you're on YouTube Live. We're also on Facebook. Please submit your questions during the broadcast at any time, and we can add them to the discussion. And so here we go. So today I have a guest, Bill Maynard. I always pronounce things wrong. How do you say your name?
Maynard.
Maynard. Okay, Bill Maynard. His tag is W7 Zulu Tango.
Right.
And we'll get more into what that means in the future here. He also has his hand radio amateur club,
Right.
which should be able to see any second now on the screen, the website. But can you tell us a little bit about the amateur radio club?
Yeah, we have a local amateur radio club called the Sun Life Club, and basically it's made up of retired people who come here into the Valley of the Sun, and we meet every week and discuss amateur radio projects and have guest speakers. And we have as many as 50, 60 retired people that come to our meetings every week.
Perfect. Well, I think I timed the slides a little bit longer than I thought, because it should have been popping up the website here. But it is. You can find it online. You can type in it on Google. What's the name of the club?
Sun Life Amateur Radio Club.
Sun Life Amateur Radio Club, and I'll have the link to the website in the below description after we record it afterwards. So you can just click on that link. And yeah, it's a great club, and we'll talk more about what they do here in a moment after we go into our discussion on the end of the world. Okay, so getting moving here. Technology at the end of the world. Now, at the end of the world, there's many different scenarios that could happen that could destroy us or collapse our civilization. We could have some, sci-fi-ish kind of things out there, but they're a possibility. Many experts say nanobots that start consuming everything, or we have artificial intelligence that gains a mind of its own and starts killing us all, wiping off humans, or we have more practical, realistic natural disasters like earthquakes, volcanoes, global warming, asteroids, meteors. So not to bring you guys down at all, but at any day we could be destroyed by something. I mean, if we don't get destroyed by any of that, then in about a couple billion years, the sun's gonna engulf us. What did Donald Trump say? He said it doesn't matter about global warming because the sun will engulf us anyway. Or that was Gary Johnson that said that actually. Okay, so now here we go on. So at the end of the world, let's say no matter what the disaster is, whether it's meteorites or a plague or a disease or bio warfare or nuclear weapons, we are going to be in chaotic. If you're still alive, it's going to be very chaotic. The United States electrical grid is divided into 4 electrical grids. You have the East Hemisphere, the West Hemisphere, and Texas on its own. Actually, that's 3. Sorry, 3 electrical grids. You have East, West, and Texas on its own. These electrical grids are constantly controlled by experts who are constantly deciding where power needs to go in the United States, delivering less power at night and more power during the day to certain cities that need it. They're constantly maintaining this control. So at the end of the world, without people that are constantly controlling our electrical grid's going to go chaotic. You may receive too much power and have a blown transistor or transformer, or you may get not enough power and not be able to power your electrical devices or all the necessary power that we need in our ongoing life. So we've gotten used to a lot of conveniences, like our cell phone, being able to just call someone, or the internet, being able to go onto Facebook and just chat with someone. So we got used to all these different electrical devices that we use every day, right, Bill?
Right.
And at the end of the world, they're not really that useful. Even if you still have power in your city, which could be likely, power plants will continue providing power for a long time. Dams will continue providing power unmanned until they get clogged or rusted. So power could still be around, but even if power is still around, you still have lots of people trying to make phone calls. There's lots of issues with cell phones and the internet where it can get bogged down. You're limited by bandwidth. You're limited by the space you have. So you may not be able to get out to your family. You may not be able to contact them. But there is a solution for this. And that's why I brought Bill here. Bill's an expert in ham radios. He's been working on ham radios for how many years now?
Since 1958.
1958. So he knows a lot about them. And he's going to tell you right now more and more in detail how they work, how you can get in contact with people around the world with them, and how in a disaster you can use them to help save your family or save your life or stay in contact with your family and know that they're still alive with ham radios. So here's Bill.
Well, mentioning floods or earthquakes or any kind of disasters, and you probably remember a few years ago when Katrina took out most of New Orleans, and the communication was just non-existent. And the amateur radios in the area were able to get together and set up portable antennas with portable radios with batteries and communicate, and it basically saved the communications through the whole disaster. And that's one of the things that we as hams try to do, is to provide these services to people no matter where they are. We're able to use our portable radios with battery power and put up portable antennas, and we can do this in a matter of 15 minutes. We can be communicating across the city, across the state, across the world if necessary. So it's a very valuable thing that we do as amateurs. And amateur radio community is about 700,000 in the United States. That many hams are licensed in the United States, all licensed by the FCC. And I might go into a little bit of how this happens, how you become an amateur radio operator. There are testing facilities. People and hams themselves have testing classes, have education classes as to how you become a ham, and they're basically 3 different divisions. You can be the number 1 division is called a technician, and that allows you certain privileges and certain power levels that you can use for becoming a radio operator. And then you can advance from that to a general class, which gives you some more privileges. And then finally, there is what's called an amateur extra class that gives you all of the band privileges in the amateur radio spectrum. And these spectrums are available from point to point, like what we call 2-meter transmissions, going through repeaters that go all over the country. And all the way up to a lot of our hams have 100-foot towers with very, very big antennas and communicate all over the world. And
so do you need then a license to be able to operate the ham radio, or is it the classes for training, or does it you have to have it?
You have to have a FCC license, and we have a community of people who are qualified to give these tests, and to as soon as they answer so many questions, basically maybe 50 questions on a test, and they answer the right amount, you're allowed to get your amateur radio license. And it's a very valuable thing. It takes some technology. It takes some knowledge of electronics. And one of the real exciting things that what we've done over the last few years is we've integrated the amateur radio with computers. And now we have a whole allotment of digital communications where we can use what's called continuous wave, CW, or code. We can use code on a computer. We can type into a keyboard, and the code goes out over the air. We can talk with video, with television. We can do many different types of.
So when you're talking on video, is it transmitting still as a signal on the
It's called
bandwidth?
amateur TV.
Okay.
Right. and it's still it's been around for a long time, and it's another part of communication, right? The one of the other things that we do with amateur radio, and again, I want to stress that communication and helping people in disasters is probably the most valuable thing that we do. The other thing is the hobby itself, and the hobby is it becomes a challenge to you as to how many different people around the world can you talk to. Now, generally, you start out, and when you're a technician class, you might be able to talk across town, through the state, and then start going as you develop into the amateur radio world. You can start talking around the country, and then talking around the world.
Oh.
And one of the fun things that we do is that we exchange QSL cards. This is my card here. Let's put it right way up. And it's when you contact someone around the country, generally we exchange QSL cards, and that is an acknowledgement that yes, we talked to this person somewhere, say in England, and we will exchange cards. And then when you strive for different levels. If you can you do 100 countries, that's a certain certificate that you can acquire.
Oh, wow.
There are about 335 different countries that we might be able to contact around the world.
So what does this the code mean? What is that?
The call letters are, my particular call is W7 Zulu Tango.
So why do you have these call letters?
Well, the United States is designated call letters from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 0. And depending on where you are, if you were in the state of Maine, your call letters would be a 1. And if you were in Texas, it probably is a 5. Here in Arizona, it's a 7. California, it's a 6. Alaska, a KL7. But back when it started, you could tell where someone was from by their call letters. But here in the United States now, because of so much movement of people around the country, you can't tell anymore, because you could be have a call letter that has a 1 in it, and you might be here in Arizona.
Okay.
But
so it's like the original username that now internet gamer tag.
But in the rest of the country, or the rest of the world, the call letters designate that particular entity, and it's just a fascinating thing to be able to sit at your radio sometimes with very low power, maybe as low as 5 watts of power, to be able to communicate with someone else that's around the world, maybe 12,500 miles away, and we can go both ways around the world. And depending on the communication and the sunspot activity, and so it's a fascinating hobby.
That is really cool. Now, what if there was a family who just wanted a radio just for emergencies? Could they without a license, could they just purchase a radio and use it in an emergency situation?
To use the amateur frequencies, you have to be licensed by the FCC.
Okay.
In contrast to that was the CB radio thing, which was not licensed. But, yes, you have to have license, and it's very, very easy to get. With a minimum of studying and training, you can get a license quite well. We have amateurs that are as young as 7 years old, and we have old guys like me, and guys well up into their hundreds still active on the radio.
But they could use a radio just to listen to emergency broadcasts,
certainly,
or get information even if they didn't have.
Certainly.
They could listen, right?
And with the digital age, it is incredible what we're able to do. We're able to just to communicate around the world. Not only with we have systems called that work through the internet also. That we can use the internet for communication also. Okay,
and you mentioned CB. What's that?
That's a communication that came about maybe 40, 50 years ago. That, and I don't really remember why it became available, but it became very popular. You could have a small radio and a little antenna. You could put it in your car. You could talk to truckers. That in fact, the trucking industry still use CB radio for communication.
Okay.
And in fact, a lot of truckers that have done that have upgraded and become amateur radio operators.
Okay.
So you might be going down the road in an 18-wheeler talking to a guy on amateur radio.
Yeah.
And that kind of keeps them busy.
Yeah. So basically, let's say there's someone who procrastinated and they were meant to get their license, but they didn't do it, and then a disaster hit the next day, or they're about to do it and a disaster hit. Could they then use CB radio to stay in contact with their family?
But the problem with CB radio is it's very limited as to
the range,
what distance that you can talk, and the power that's available.
Okay.
And that particular spectrum is not real active, and this whole radio thing is what do I want to say? The sunspots. The sun regulates the communication. The number of sunspots, if they're up or down, depending on what time of the day, if it's daylight or whether it's darkness, the communication is just it changes completely from one part of the world to the other.
Is that because of the radiation that interferes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Right now, and the sunspot cycle goes in an 11-year cycle. We're about in the middle of the 11-year cycle, where it goes up to the top, and you can communicate with very little power and very small antennas. And as it comes down, it becomes very much more difficult to communicate.
So what if the disaster then is a solar flare disaster? Would the radios be?
Well, then we can go to a frequency that's called 2 meters, which is 144 megahertz, and this is line to sight. So, for instance, if there was a disaster here in Phoenix, we could set up and we could go most of Arizona through that mode. And then we have all over the valley on mountaintops are things called repeaters, and we can take a 2 meter antenna, a small 2 meter radio, and put a signal to this repeater, and that repeater will go all over the country, and sometimes all over the country.
Does it maintain its quality that way, or does it lose it as it gets repeated?
No, it doesn't. It's not dependent upon the sunspot cycle. It's a line of sight thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The other thing I might add too is that most police stations and police people around the country have interlink between amateur radio frequencies, so that if the cell phone things should go out and we could be able to set up and communicate, we can also have the ability to communicate back to the police people, and they can help them go where they need to go.
Yeah, I've also heard of like police scanners where you can scan the police frequencies, and that's kind of like similar to that, but different frequencies.
Except that you can't communicate to them.
Yeah,
because hear what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Because it'd be illegal to interfere with the police communication. But yeah, what else do you have about hand radios?
There's some contesting things that go on. It's quite interesting. Is that every week there's probably maybe a dozen contests that go on throughout the world, and the whole thing is that you see how many contacts you can make, and then you verify that you made these contacts. And then there are different awards that you can make, or certificates. It's unlimited as to what you can absorb through getting into to the contacts. I have been privileged to go to on what's called D-expeditions.
Yeah.
And D-expeditions are where a group of hams will get together and they'll go to some place remotely in the world, and set up antennas and radios and communicate with the rest of the amateurs. And some of these places are very, very rare. Yeah. For instance, there was a group of people here from Phoenix that just 2 or 3 months ago, went down by the Arctic Circle.
Oh, wow.
And islands that are out in the middle of nowhere, and just terrible, terrible conditions.
Yeah.
And but they'll set up because no one has ever communicated from those places before. And so
cool.
it becomes a rare thing to be able to, wow, I made a communication with
Yeah.
them. I've been
And
able
it kind
to,
of shows you the power of it, because if you took your cell phone out there, you would need to build a bunch of different
Right.
cellular towers, and your cell phone wouldn't work. So.
I've been privileged to be able to go on 5D expeditions myself, but we have a different kind of a thing. I belong to a group that have been going to the Caribbean, and I've been to 5 Caribbean islands where it's different than going to some place where the conditions are terrible,
Yeah.
and you have to.
The conditions are great there.
But we go where there are 5-star hotels
Yeah.
that we can set up and put antennas around,
Yeah.
and go to the beaches.
Nice.
And so anyway, it's a different kind of communication. So it's been a fun thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so tell us again, like how can someone start doing this? Like,
You can contact the regulators of amateur radio is called the Amateur Relay League, ARRL, and they're headquartered in Newington, Connecticut. Been there since about early 1900s, and they are the regulatory people for amateur radio. But just about every town has a ham somewhere in the country. As I mentioned, there are about 700,000 amateurs in the country, and we, for instance, here in the Phoenix area, in fact, in Mesa area, once a month they hold testing sessions, and they might get 20, 30 people every month that become amateur radio operators.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's a very nice thing that we do and particularly getting young people and people from all types of all spaces of life. We have every occupation that you can think of.
Yeah.
There's an amateur radio operator.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's not just engineering people or
Yeah.
people involved with electronics.
So do you learn about culture and a lot of different perspectives, or?
No, you learn about the electronics and how these things work and how you put them together.
But when you're like talking to people,
Oh yeah, well this is the
you
thing.
probably like have a lot of
This is the
interesting
thing.
conversations.
You call rag chewing.
Yeah.
I might be in contact with somebody, for instance, in California, and we find that all of a sudden we have a similar interest.
Yeah.
And or we talk about children. We talk about the weather. We talk not much about politics.
Okay.
We don't talk much about politics or religion because those are controversial things. You don't really get into that. But we talk about our radios and the power that we're running, and where we've been or what we're doing or what vacations we've taken, and it's a wonderful communication device and building friendships.
Yeah, I agree. I might imagine being able to communicate around the world. It like has its own unique club, and you can really form a lot of bonds.
I have a special communication thing that I've done. I have become acquainted with a fellow ham in Zurich, Switzerland.
Oh, whoa.
And we do building antennas. Communicate back and forth. One of us will have an idea as to, gee, I wonder if we can make this kind of an antenna. And we have built some really pretty neat little things that we put together, and both of us on either end. As a matter of fact, one of the expeditions that I recently was on, I had built an antenna, and I put it up alongside of the swimming pool, about 200 feet above the ocean, pointed it towards Europe. And my friend in Switzerland put up a similar antenna in Switzerland, and we made 3 contacts back and forth.
Oh, whoa.
So it was really special to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And that particular antenna, sitting up by that swimming pool, and this was in St. Martin in the Caribbean. I made 800 contacts with that particular in about 6 days.
Okay.
So it's fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly before about New Orleans. So does the amateur club you're saying help a lot with emergency relief?
Oh, that's one of the wonderful things that we're able to do. Yes, New Orleans, that kind of, because it was such a terrible thing, and it just wiped out all the communications. Yes, there were amateur radio operators in conjunction with the Red Cross. The Red Cross also has emergency communications, and we also have that communication back and forth. So we're able to go anywhere we need to go around the country, and to help put people back together in these kinds of
keep people
disasters.
in communication, let them know what emergency services suggest, or where they're located, or where the Red Cross is located. That's awesome. Yeah, so you have here equipment. Can you tell us kind of like what the equipment is that you use?
Well, we started out, as I mentioned, I was started in 1958, and all of the equipment was either a surplus equipment from the armed services, where we were able to take that and rework it and put it on amateur bands, and then companies started to build kits where we used to put components together and make our amateur radio. One of them particularly was called a Heath kit, and we put those together, and it has developed through the years. Now, where a radio station might have been 200 pounds of equipment. We can do the same thing better now with a piece of equipment that's probably less than a pound.
Yeah.
With the solid state devices, and I have a little amateur radio that's probably weighs less than a pound, and I can communicate around the world with it.
Oh, wow.
With the better the antenna they have, the farther you can go. But
and you can either make that antenna longer, or you can like loop it, right? You can do a bunch of different.
Well, you can put what's called beams. And beam antenna is an antenna that goes up, and then it has a horizontal beam, and then you can put multiple elements on that beam to increase the strength of the signal that's going out. And we're able to rotate that beam around to zero in on particular country.
And all this is like almost the next level to like what you hear on your car, right? The radio on your car. It's the next level to FM and AM radio.
Right. It started out with what's called on AM radio, and then we do some.
What does AM stand for?
Amplitude modulation.
Okay.
And then we went into FM, frequency modulation, and then it came the thing called single sideband, which became very popular. But there is a great number of amateurs out there that still use the code communication, using a key that's connected to the transmitter and to the antenna, and that still is.
Is that like encrypted, basically?
No. It's still. And the other thing about amateur radio that's fun for us is that English is the universal language.
Yeah.
So everyone in the world uses English.
Okay.
So that makes it much
Most
easier.
common language.
But using what's called the continuous wave, the CW function.
Yeah.
That is still the premier way and the easiest way to make communications with low power.
Yeah.
So, and back in the days when we became amateurs, we had to be able to take a test to be able to do the code function at 20 words per minute. That was part of getting a license. You had to be able to do code. Well, about 5 years or so ago, they eliminated the code function, so you don't have to learn the code anymore to get your amateur license.
Yeah.
And so that has brought a lot of people back in, and brought a lot of people that couldn't learn the code but still be able to get a license.
Yeah. So give it a little bit of science about how like radio signals work, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a frequency, and you have light spectrum, the visible light spectrum. Then you have radiation. You have ultraviolet on one side and infrared on the other side, and then in there you have radio frequencies, right?
And
Is that correct?
That's kind of how it works. When we get communication around the world, the signal really goes up to the atmosphere,
Yeah.
ionization level, and it will bounce up and down a number of times and go into another country.
Yeah.
And another fascinating area that we've developed is that a number of hams have what we call EME, Earth, Moon, Earth communication.
Yeah.
And we have one fellow here in town that is probably one of the world's experts in doing that.
Oh, that's cool.
He sets up an antennas. In fact, he also did this when he was down close to the Arctic Circle.
Because there's an antenna on the moon, isn't there? Or
no,
is that where you're getting to?
You actually bounce. It's not from an antenna. You
Okay.
just bounce off of that.
And bounce off the moon?
Off of the moon, and back around to someone else in the world.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's it's hard to do, but you got to have the right equipment.
So is that, and you may not know this, but is that affected by the full moon? Because I know that there are scientists who are bouncing a laser off the moon, off a mirror that was left there by astronauts. Mm-hmm. And when it's a full moon, the sunlight's too bright, so it heats up the mirror, and the mirror can no longer reflect the light. Yeah. But I'm guessing radios don't have that problem because it doesn't rely on the.
You've got to have the moon showing to be able to.
Yeah, the moon showing.
I'm assuming that. I'm not that technically involved with that particular section of our hobby. But
do you ever send? Is there any region of the amateur club that sends signals out into space? Just like send it.
Well, this is the thing. All of those signals, as far as I'm concerned, are still out there somewhere.
Yeah.
When I became an operator in 1958, I'm convinced that somewhere in this wonderful, wild universe, those signals are still going somewhere.
Yeah.
And someone may be interpreting them. That would be something that in the future that would be quite wonderful.
And Mike over here behind the scenes is praying for that.
Well, if you remember on Star Trek, they had the whole thing where they get into deep space and they start playing 70s and 80s music.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's something that I don't think that this will be a disaster, but a lot of people think that one disaster scenario is aliens do hear a signal and they decide we're a threat or they're evil aliens and they come and destroy us. I personally think if aliens could make this journey to Earth, they're going to have no reason to want to bother us or kill us or even deal with us. So.
Who knows?
But no one knows that yet.
Somewhere else in the universe, they might be much more technically capable than what we are.
Yeah, and in the future, maybe I'll have an episode where we talk about the SETI program. That'd be really cool, and the what NASA's doing to communicate with space, deep space, and really cool.
You mentioned NASA, and that's another fun thing that we do is that the space station also has an amateur radio communication station right there. Oh,
cool.
So that one of the things that we're able to do is that as the space station circles the world, we're able to communicate with people around the world.
Oh.
And particularly, it's wonderful for.
Can you talk to the astronauts?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
For school children. A lot of amateur radio, or a lot of schools have amateur radio clubs.
Yeah.
One of the things that's fascinating to have them do is to see whether they can talk to an astronaut as he's coming over. So the space is very short because it's right directly. You've got to go directly to him.
Yeah.
And but it's another fun thing and a way for youngsters to learn about amateur radio. And
NASA actually on their Facebook recently set up a live camera outside of the space station, so you can actually watch them live too now on the internet, and you can see them. And I guess they have like a very short day because every now and then the camera's pitch black, and then you have a sunrise, really beautiful, and then it's like really cool. And now you know how to talk to them. So get your amateur's license, and you can talk to them as well.
Right.
And I'm sure they don't let just anybody talk to them, but like you said.
Well, if you're on that amateur frequency and you're feel free to chat with them, they take the time to tune in on certain frequencies, and they even put this information out so that you know when they'll be coming over.
Have you ever talked to an astronaut?
Yes.
What was the conversation like?
Oh, just generally. Those kind of conversations are very a thank you for communicating what your name is and where you are and how old you are, and then you naturally want to ask them questions because that's a foreign environment that they're in. And back, it's kind of wild that a person can be just floating around in the air up there and with headset on, and he's talking to someone.
Yeah. So what's the most interesting conversation you've ever had? Have you ever had like a weird interaction or unusual interaction?
No, gee, I can't really think of anything sticks out. I guess the one of the most fulfillment things is one of them that I just indicated before about having a friend in Switzerland.
Yeah.
We set up a schedule and to be able to build a piece of equipment and then talk back and forth.
Yeah,
and that's very fulfilling.
I've always wanted to visit Switzerland. It looks really cool.
Well,
who doesn't?
Yeah, I've had the privilege. I've been there a number of times.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating hobby,
Mm-hmm.
and again, as I mentioned, there's people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And particularly interesting of people in other parts of the world that have a similar interest in this electronics thing, but who knows what their vocation is, what they're doing.
Yeah, and as you said before, and this is outside of your amateur club, but I was wondering if you knew anything about this. Is there any way to use radios, like let's say Egypt? Remember how they recently had that cut off from the internet?
Mm-hmm.
They were completely isolated. Was there any way to use radios to stay in contact with them?
Yes. There's agreements through most of the countries in the world except North Korea.
Oh yeah.
But back in the early days, there were people who went to North Korea, and there were Koreans themselves that had amateur radios, and were able to communicate. And that is still the number one place where all of the amateurs would like to communicate with. And every so often, there are people that are able to go into North Korea and set up an amateur station and communicate with the rest of the world.
Huh.
And you can imagine when he gets on the air and indicates where he is, that a flood of people that have heard him will be trying to communicate with him.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the rarest places in the world to be able to communicate.
But it's risky because this is all open. It's not encrypted.
Well, but you cannot do that without their permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would be in a dungeon somewhere.
Yeah. I'm sure the government has encrypted frequencies where they also try to.
It's not amateur radio. It's not.
It's not an image. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have a magazine in front of you. Can you tell us what this magazine is about?
This is a magazine called QRHT Magazine, and it's put out by this ARRL, which is the kind of the Bible. This is kind of everyone that's amateur radio operator generally gets involved with this club, and they're in communication with the FCC and back and forth, and it's a very informative thing. Every month they come out with, and that list shows the types of equipment that's available to use, and contest, who was involved with the contest, and who won the contest, and where they were from, and it's just a valuable piece of gear that in a magazine that people write articles for to help us increase our knowledge of the state of the art.
Yeah, so if you're interested in this is probably a good way to start, to know what to buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a beginner and I'm wondering where to start, you kind of talked about this briefly already. But do I go out and just buy equipment right away, or do I go to one of your classes first, or do I attend?
You need to find a ham. And ham radio is what they call us hams, and there's various reasons where that came from. But you need to find a local club or a local ham, and we have in the hobby we call is an Elmer. An Elmer is someone who helps someone else become an amateur radio operator. So we all had our Elmers to help us.
Yeah.
I had a particular one that was when I was in high school. my industrial arts teacher was an amateur radio operator.
Yeah.
And I wasn't interested at the time, but as I left school and went on with life, I thought, gee, I remember that my high school industrial arts teacher was a ham.
Yeah.
And so I contacted him, and he was my Elmer. He got me started in amateur radio. And then until his death, we were able to communicate.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then I had the privilege of moving around the country a lot. So,
Yeah.
These call letters that I have now, I've had, this is my 6 different call letters that I've had as I've moved around the country.
Yeah.
So anyway, a fun hobby. I would encourage anyone that has an interest at all to find a local ham. Go
Yeah.
there. There's stores all over the world that you can buy equipment. And you can buy used equipment, and you can go on eBay and look at amateur radio, and they list the equipment that's available. And so I would encourage take that method also.
Yeah, and as you can see, the website finally popped up.
Yes.
And so there's a website you can go to kind of get started, to kind of get some information. And this is a really cool club. They actually, if you're in the Mesa area, some of our viewers are in Germany. I think a couple of them are. But if you're in the Mesa area, because a lot of our viewers are, then they have a club that meets here at the Think Spot, right? It's just a few of you that meet here at the Think Spot every Thursday, right around 1 o'clock. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys just talk about ham radios, and it seems really cool. And you have experts that come in and talk about it, and you have classes here in the evenings that for people getting their license. I think you've already gone a few classes in.
Yes.
But you might start a new one.
In fact, there's
in the future.
There's an ongoing class right now.
Oh, cool!
Yes,
Perfect.
yes.
And they can just jump in that, or do they need to start from the beginning?
You have to start at the beginning. But I think there was 8 or 10 people that are involved right now. In the classes to be able to get their license.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so if you're paranoid about the end of the world, or you're just interested in talking to people from all around the world and seeing what interesting conversations you could get into, or maybe you are on the road and you want to talk to some truck drivers, then no matter what the situation is, Ham Radio Club is a perfect way to get started and to get your license and to learn a little bit of technical. Plus, it's a good job skill. You can put it on your resume that you know it.
Certainly.
And it can help improve in other areas of your life. So it's a great way to go. Do you have anything else to say to us, Bill?
Gee, I would. It's a wonderful hobby. As I say, I've been in it since 1958, and I get. In fact, this morning we went to a local park, which we do every Thursday morning. I started going there in 2008, and I've personally been there at least 400 times, setting up amateur radio and antennas and talking around the world.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a fun hobby. And I get as much thrill. I made one contact this morning real quickly. I put up an antenna and talked to a guy in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I get just as much thrill out of that as I did in 1958 when I made that first contact.
Oh, that's cool.
Because you never know who's going to be out there and who you're going to be able to
So
talk
can you
to.
estimate how many contacts you made around the world?
Oh,
Maybe like in the thousands, millions?
50, 60, 100,000. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you probably have a lot of these postcards.
Yes, yeah, that's part of the hobby too.
Yeah.
Is to collecting the cards.
Yeah.
And you get various awards when you collect so many.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you heard it from Bill. Join the Amateur Radio Club. And now we're going to close out. So W7 Zulu Tango out.
Okay.
Or, not out. Out. There we go.
All right. Well, this is fun.
No. Okay, tomorrow we have 3D Worlds. We have an expert from Stax 3D coming in to talk about 3D printing and what 3D printing is, how we can use 3D printer to help us in our daily lives, and where the future of 3D printing is going. You can find Qonda Entertainment on YouTube, of course, on Facebook, on Twitter, and you can also, we're trying to get it worked out, but we're uploading our podcast as audio only to SoundCloud, so you can listen to these as audio only on the go. And then also you can submit any questions and anytime and anywhere. And perfect.